more information whenever you slow them down. So just remember, normal clips, 24 frames per second, slow motion, 60 to 120 frames per second. So now that we have frame rates out of the way, there are 3 so-called pillars that you have to know in getting the correct exposure. 3 settings that you have to juggle all at once to get the correct exposure on your camera: ISO, aperture, and shutter speed. These 3 settings all affect the exposure of the image, but will also affect other things as well that you need to be aware of. So instead of just learning one of these, we want to learn all of them at the exact same time so we can show you how to adjust each one to get the correct exposure. The first setting, and probably the easiest to understand, is ISO. And this is what many people refer to as fake light. This is basically a way to make your image brighter or darker completely digitally. So with this, you are able to turn up the exposure inside your camera regardless of how many lights you have on set or whether it's nighttime or daytime. It's like that little bar on your cell phone that you can move up or down to make your image brighter or darker. Now, ISO is measured on a little bit different scale. It's not like 1 to 20 or something like that. It's usually 100, 125, 160, 200, 250, 320, all the way up to 16,000 and so on. And some cameras can even go up to 200,000 or more. The higher the number, the brighter your image will be. So you're probably thinking, well, this is great, right? I mean, it doesn't matter what I'm shooting outside or how many lights I have. If it's too dark, I simply turn up the ISO and everything's great. Well, ISO does have one major downside, and that is it produces noise and grain into your image. When you boost your ISO, it starts to look like TV static on your image. Now on a picture, this doesn't really look that bad because if you have the ISO super high and you take a picture, it kind of looks like an old vintage style. But in video, the noise will actually move and it looks like genuine TV static inside of your image. So if I put the lens cap on my camera, you can see what I'm talking about. If I have the ISO at 100, which is the lowest it can go, there is no grain, no noise, and it looks like a black image. But as I start to bump up the ISO, you might start to see a little bit of noise and grain. And then whenever I get into the higher ISO numbers, you can really see the noise it's adding. Just imagine this placed over your image. Of course, some of the newer Sony cameras have such good ISO that they hardly have any grain whatsoever. But most cameras tend to get a little noisy starting around 1600 ISO. So the basic rule is ISO does control the exposure, but you want to keep it as low as possible to keep the grain out of your image. That is the first pillar of exposure. The second pillar of exposure is called shutter speed. Now, if you've dabbled in photography at all, you probably know what a shutter speed is. Your shutter speed on your camera is how long your image is exposed to the world. So the sensor inside the camera is what sees the world and captures the image onto the SD card. But there is a shutter in front of the sensor that keeps it from seeing anything. It's almost like the eyelid to your camera. When the shutter opens, it allows the sensor to see an image, and then whenever it closes, that's one picture taken. And that's why on a lot of cameras, whenever they take pictures, you can actually hear the sound of the shutter opening and closing. But depending on how fast the shutter will go up and down, will make your image brighter or darker. So if you have a very slow shutter speed and the shutter opens and stays open for a long time, it's basically letting the sensor see the world and soak in as much light as it possibly can. So if your shutter is open for 4 seconds and closes, the image is going to be beyond bright. But if your shutter opens and closes in a fraction of a second, it doesn't allow the sensor to see very much light at all, resulting in a darker image. That's the basics of shutter speed with photography, but with video, it's pretty much the exact same thing, except it's all done digitally. You're basically affecting how long each of those little 24 frames are exposed to the world. If we have a really slow shutter speed with video, it's going to act like the same thing and allow more light into the camera. And if we have a really fast shutter speed, it's not going to allow much light into the camera, resulting in a darker image. So slower shutter speed is a brighter image, and faster shutter speed is a darker image. But just like with ISO, shutter speed doesn't only change exposure. It also affects something else. When you change the shutter speed, you also affect the motion blur. So let's go back to photography with an actual physical shutter that opens and closes. So say you're taking a picture of a car that's driving past. Well, if you have a really fast shutter speed that's going to literally take a picture in a fraction of a second, it's going to open up, see the car directly in front of the camera, and close. And that's all it's going to see. So there's going to be no motion blur because the camera is actually seeing the car in front of it for a split second. But if you have a really slow shutter speed and the shutter opens...
Si quieres vender online, asegúrate de llamar la atención. Ve a Wix e-commerce.
Hey guys, Justice here with tomorrowsfilmmakers.com, the largest online film academy in the world, and today we're talking about cinematic movement. Now this video is part 3 in our cinematic trilogy: cinematic composition, cinematic lighting, and cinematic movement. Now you might not know this, but if you move the camera at all, you communicate something to your audience. And every movement of the camera communicates a message and an emotion to your audience. So we have to determine exactly how to take advantage of that and use every single moment and every single movement to deliver the right emotion. Now, this video is not a video on every single type of camera movement, like a push in or a pull away or a crane shot, etc. We have episodes all about that in our full course, but this video is about the 8 steps that you need to take in order to create cinematic movement. And because of that reason, inside our full course, we have 2 entire cinematography courses, one taught by Chris Kimlin and the other taught by Josh Osley. Both of these courses together will teach you everything you could possibly need to know about cinematography and lighting. And you can learn more about that inside our full course at tomorrowsfilmmakers.com. Now, we've been selling our film course successfully for years with an $800 price tag and have had over 4,000 students. But right now we're doing something we have never done before, and we are running an insane sale of only $97. Our entire lifetime membership to our award-winning $800 film course for only $97. No joke. If you want to take advantage of this crazy deal, you can check out our website in the link below and head on over to tomorrowsfilmmakers.com to learn more. But today I want to give you the 8 steps you need to take in order to have cinematic movement in your projects. If you take these 8 steps, I promise you, your projects will look 1,000 times better, even if you just have a cell phone. Starting off with the very first step that will improve your projects faster than you can imagine is to avoid handheld. Nothing screams amateur more than seeing some handheld footage in someone's filmmaking. Now, some projects require more of a handheld look for more grittiness and a certain style, but not the